Hi, today I'm gonna do a video essay and it's called When I'm Not Enough to Be Considered Family, Am I Asking for Too Much? So I'd like to start off with the work by Brandon Andrew Robinson titled Conditional Families and Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer Youth, Homelessness, Gender, Sexuality, Family Instability, and Rejection. On page 385, quote, the main pathways into youth homelessness are abuse and neglect, family breakdown, and aging out of government programs, unquote. So when I was 16, my parents divorced, which was a relief at the time because there was domestic violence in my household. And my brother and I, we were happy that our parents had divorced, but we were soon caught in the middle of the feud, that occurs when folks divorce. So a little backstory. My parents owned a custom cabinet business, which allowed my parents to have large amounts of disposable cash. And through the divorce, my mother was left without income, and the house we lived in was sold. And my mother, she gave up everything except custody of her children. Like, I don't know why she didn't fight for more, but all she wanted was her kids, is what she says. So we soon were living with our grandmother and depending on others in the family, like our aunts and others, for housing, for food, for clothing, pocket money. And my mom, she started dating a man and she soon started neglecting her duties as a mother, which led to my grandmother taking on that role, right? So after a few years of living with my mother moved us into an apartment, and that's where her transphobia really started increasing a large amount, right? I mean, throughout my life, she was doing things to prevent me from acting, either too feminine or not doing girl things, right? So when we moved, that's when things really started happening. And so the word transgender was not used back in the 80s when I was a youth. So to my mother, I was just seen as maybe like, or I was just seen as like a drag queen, cross-dresser, transvestite. And, I was her son that liked to dress in women's clothing is how she seen me. So one day my mom, she discovered my clothing and eyeliner and she accused me of stealing her clothing and makeup. And my mom was good at doing her makeup and her style was always chic. So I would mimic her makeup style and her clothing, right? And so I grew up in a rural part of California, which meant there were like little options for clothing as well. So, eyeliner I used was the same brand as hers because I learned from watching her. And so my mom was 4 feet 11 and I'm 5'8". So there's no way I could even fit into her clothes. But I guess she didn't even look at the size other than she just thought that those clothes were hers because I didn't have money to buy clothing. So on page 387, Robinson states, quote, conditional families are familiar wherein certain terms or conditions related to gender and sexuality had to be met for the youth to be part of the family, unquote. And because I continued to dress in what she considered an inappropriate way, I was told to get out of her house, right? And there, I was soon struggling to find the resources needed to survive, things like food, money, shelter. And just as Robinson writes about Janelle saying, quote, and you know how people say a mother's love is unconditional, unquote. Well, I too figured out that my mother's love, it was conditional. And she demanded that I stop dressing like a girl or I'll have to move out. And she was using her authority and setting a condition for me to abide by it. And if I wanted to be a member of the family of origin, I had to not dress in women's clothing, right? So in a way, she was treating me as if I'm doing something illegal and that deserves sanctions. So for the rest of my life or throughout my life, I've also used conflict avoidance and conflict boundary work, right? And there was a period in my life where I didn't talk to my mother for 10 years because she did not accept me for being a trans woman. She accepted more of me being a gay man, but a trans woman, nah, that wasn't something that she would accept, right? So I experienced what Ren Rexick and Emma Bosley Smith wrote about in how LGBTQ adults maintain ties with rejecting parents, theorizing conflict work as family work, right? On page 1136, when they mentioned, quote, certain milestones provide opportunities for previously ignored conflicts to reemerge or resolve, unquote. So I think it was 2014, my stepfather passed away, and I agreed to stay with my mother to assist her with things she needed to get done regarding the estate, right? So I put my own transition on hold because she told me that if I'm going to live with her, I wasn't allowed to dress as a woman in her home. And I agreed because I figured this would be a perfect opportunity to rekindle the lack of relationship. And in the end, I just wanted my mommy. So living with my mom, I had to sneak, being my true authentic self. Not only was I putting my transition on hold, I was using conflict avoidance by not presenting as female as a way to keep the peace. And as long as I didn't present as female in front of her, then things would remain quite peaceful. And speaking about my mommy, there's one night when I went out and on my way home, I was physically assaulted by three men. And when I was in the emergency room, my mom showed up and she immediately said that it was because I was dressed as a woman and it was my fault and that I should not have gone out dressed like that, right? And all I wanted was just my mom's comfort. But even at a time like that, she didn't give it. And so, was it too much to have a relationship with my mom over the years? Was it too much to ask for a mother's unconditional love? And what I discovered is that is, I'm not asking, or I wasn't asking for too much. I was asking too much from the wrong person. And being that my mother was raised during a time when the nuclear family was made up of, two cisgender heterosexual people, she watched shows like The Lucy Show, Ozzie and Harriet, Leave It to Beaver, things like that. And that's how she based life and how people should act and behave. And, my mother passed away from an act of violence from her husband. So I never got to experience unconditional love of a mother because she was not a mother that could provide that. Thank you.